Brahman protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, and with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. And now we have all gathered for the second in a series of classes called Tibetan Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta. And last week we went through the teachings on the Bardo states. That is, the focus was on how to be reborn consciously, which is going to presume that you also go to your death, your so-called death, passing from this particular form, this particular body, called the not-self, in a state of consciousness, and also that you've lived a life based on spiritual practice. So those two are requisites for a conscious rebirth, that is, a rebirth in higher intelligence, higher wisdom, in knowledge of that Jnanamatra, or that intelligent cell that we're talking about, that particle of intelligence that we've had series of classes on. That there's a stream like any other particle streams, only this stream is more like the sound emanating from a bell or light emanating from a sun. There are metaphors we can use in everyday life in the world, but this is something that can't be seen with the eyes, although some report to see a sort of aura or a divine light emanating off of beings who are immersed in the stream of intelligence. Higher consciousness or timeless, deathless awareness. Sometimes we borrow those terms in English to explain Sanskrit words like Brahman or Atman or Chaitanya, Pragyaparam, Tathagatagarbha, if you want to go toward the Buddhist way of speaking. And we will go toward the Buddhist way of speaking today, because the subject of my talk is Tibetan Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta. We recently gave a retreat on Zen Buddhism about a month back while we were in Oregon at the SRV ashram there. Prior to that, I remember a student saying, I'd really like to come to your Zen Buddhist retreat, but it's not my path. I'm a Vedantist. I said, if you were a Vedantist, you wouldn't say that. Because what have I been telling you all this time? That there is no such thing as a foreign religion, that all religion is
indigenous to your soul.
Indigenous to your soul. And so that goes very much hand in hand with that saying in the ancient scriptures, probably the most ancient scripture, even if you take into consideration carbon dating, as they call it, the Rig Veda, many thousand years prior to Christianity birth. That saying is Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vedanti. Ekam Sat is one truth. And so the idea is that there is many paths leading to one goal, or truth is one. Seers call it by different names. Sometimes you get that interpretation from it. So that is something you need to understand about Vedanta, that actually turns things universal. It is the universal appeal of the Vedanta to make a Christian a better Christian, a Hindu a better Hindu, a Jew a better Jew, a Muslim a better Muslim. So it's not really a denomination we're talking about when we speak about the universal Vedanta. So in that regard, you should shine its light on every path, particularly the path you were born in, which is for us is Christianity. We were born here basically in Christian culture, and Jewish culture too, so we have to look at Christianity and Judaism through this very special boon. And Ramakrishna Paramhamsa, who's our teacher and the ideal of this ashram here, along with Holy Mother and Swami Vivekananda, has put it in those no uncertain terms as well, that we have to go beyond Quran and beyond Bible and beyond Vedas, but by knowing the Quran, the Bible, and the Vedas. first. You can't discard something or put it behind you or even put it away until you have known it. That's why I just chanted, the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this. Of what? That all is Brahman. Tattvamasi, that thou are that too. So with this very non-compromising and cutting-edge Advaita Vedanta, we're calling these series of classes Tibetan Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta. We called the recent retreat Zen Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta because that clarifying agent is there in the Vedanta, its ability to do that. It's sung in many different songs, for instance, this one. Esheche nutan manus ek bijori ai chale. Esheche nutan manus ek bijori ai chale. Tar viveka vairagya juli, viveka vairagya juli, viveka vairagya juli, dui kante sada jale. Esheche nutan manus ek bijori ai chale. A new man has come. If you want to see him, come along with me. He wears over his shoulder a shoulder bag, and inside of it is only two things, viveka and vairagya, discrimination between the real and the unreal, and detachment from the unreal. That's Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, a song written by Devendranath Mazumdar for the great master. It goes on in the vein that we were just talking about too. It says, Aqua, water, water, honey, Vare nama bejole. Aqua, wawa, water, honey, Vare nama de bole. Alagadi samosa, Kali nama bed bole. Alagadi samosa, Kali nama bed bole. Esheche nutan manas ek bijori ai chale. You might have aqua, water, water, pani, vari. These are all different names for water in different traditions, in different languages. And all different names, nama, de, jole, and then Allah, God, Isha, Musa. Allah is the Almighty in the Muslim religion, and God is what we call it in tradition, in our tradition here, in Christianity that is. Isha is the name for the chosen ideal in Hinduism. Musa is Muhammad. Kali, Nam, Bed Bole. Kali is the Divine Mother, the ideal of the Shaktas. So, many different names for water, just like that. There are many different names for God, but it's all one substance. See, in the case of water, it's this liquid, and in the case of human beings, it's consciousness, that one foundational. They sing it in other ways too, in very beautiful ways. That this theme, you might call it, of universality. Jo kucha hai so tu hai tuj se humne dil ko lagaya kya malaika kya insan kya Hindu kya Musliman jaise chaah due bonaya jo kuch hai so tu hai tuj se humne dil ko lagaya dil ko lagaya. Churches, temples, Kaaba, you fashion them all and you cause beings to move into them and worship. You have become the worshipper, the act of worship, the place of worship. Nothing exists but thee. It's a beautiful, non-dual axioms and truths placed in a devotional setting. Very effective. It goes on to say, God, goddess, man, woman, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, all are brought into existence by thy own inscrutable will. What are these beings without you? They all exist in you. Further goes on to say, from the life heavens, throughout the boundless universes and into the darkest netherworlds, wherever our souls journey, we find only you, but nothing exists but you. It's called a ghazal. It's a beautiful spiritual classical folk song, if you will, of India, and with a very non-dual turn to it, and very beautiful, evincing these non-dual ideas, you see. So at the foundation of all these paths is this one reality, and Vedanta is focusing on and emphasizing that, and especially with the coming of Sri Ramakrishna. A new man has come. If you want to see him, come with me, because he will show you that all religions have the same essence. They might be different in their approach and have different terminology. Many of the teachings are similar, as you'll find out today, and if you've found out in the past when you've attended SRV classes. They just have different terms. So God, Allah, Isha, Musa, Kali, whatever name you want to call that reality, you should know that they're all one and the same. That is, they're one in essence. And they appear differently from time to time, from age to age. So with that message given, we can plunge into a teaching that signifies very much this non-duality. There it is, called the Mahamudra, or the Great Seal. This is a Tibetan Buddhist teaching and has very powerful implications to it. It's actually quite simple. Simply profound might be a better way of saying it, because it's put in such a way that it gives you an opportunity to really imbibe the non-dual essence of something without a lot of complications and without a lot of technical problems as far as wordage and so forth. It's been put in such a way in English from the Tibetan language that it's very comprehensible. First of all, in the upper quote here, it tells us that Mahamudra was revealed by the Mahasiddha Tilopa, revealed to him by the Venerable Bodhisattva Samantrabhadra, and was then transmitted to Narada, to Marpa, and then to Milarepa in a sacred lineage succession. We call that Guru Parampara in Vedanta. From Guru to disciple, and the disciple passes it on to his disciples and students and so forth. And it comes down through a succession. And that is the Dharma and the teachings that show or reveal that essence of consciousness in everything, so that one doesn't forget it, and one can live a conscious life and pass from the body consciously and be reborn consciously as many times as one would choose as a bodhisattva, like, say, examples of Kala Rinpoche and Dalai Lama and Karmapa and so forth in Tibetan Buddhism today. Many different lives they've come back as the same soul, and they remember their past circumstances, and they never forget their message or their vows. So in that way, it started off in Tibet there, some 700 AD or so, when Marpa went across the Himalayas, which was very difficult to do at that time, and came down into India and learned it from Naropa, who had learned it from Tilopa. And these were Indian yogis, as it were, and with that heavy Buddhist influence from Lord Buddha, who had lived some 1,000 years previously, 550 years before Christ, and learned that great Indian darshana, you call it, called Buddhism, and brought it over the mountains back to Tibet, and then had his first major disciple in Milarepa, who learned it from him. So when we began to pick up on these special teachings, like the Bardo states we had last week, and the Mahamudra that we're picking up today, the Great Seal it's called. Mudra means a kind of seal or a kind of position that you take. It can be a hand position, that's a kind of mudra, but it also could be a mental mudra. There are physical asanas, but there are also mental asanas, as we've learned in the past. Certain stances or perspectives that you take based upon higher intelligence, higher and your deeper vows and so forth, that you're not going to deviate from once you take them on. They could be anything from brahmacharya or celibacy to monasticism or sannyas, or a vow to practice sadhana and study scriptures and meditate. All sorts of those things build up the spiritual fiber of a person and gives them character and allows them to begin to live a conscious life. So this has been done then in Tibet for some 1,300 years now. It's had that much time to develop. And one of the beautiful things that's come out of the teachings of Buddhism in Tibet is this Mahamudra, the Great Seal. It can be put, and it says here, for the practitioners of Dharma, this is a precious gem. So I'm taking that, both words, practitioner and Dharma, in a universal way. For all practitioners of spiritual life, for the Dharma that is in all of those paths, that is the seeking of the truth or the Dharma or the wisdom, that's a precious gem for everyone to listen to and take heed. So it basically is based in these three principles of the central practice of Mahamudra. One is the view, one is the practice, and one is action. So it's already very practical and very down to earth for us. It's not something that's too cerebral, and it's not something that's too transcendental. It's very much right down to earth that we can see this Buddha nature in everything, what Vedanta would call the Atman or the Paramatman. Buddhism would call Tathagarbha or Pragyaparam, the supreme intelligence Buddha referred to. So as far as the view, you can see written here, the view is what? How should we view everything? That all manifestation, the universe itself, is contained in the mind. That's the first part of the view, that everything comes from your mind. And we've been speaking that in terms of the 24 cosmic principles of Samkhya and the 8 limbs of yoga and the various teachings of the Vedanta. We have so many similar and correlative teachings about the mind-only schools, they're called, that everything is a manifestation of mind. Like I said, like a candle radiates heat and light, and like a bell emanates sound, the great mind emanates intelligence. It's a great sun of intelligence, if you will, or a great bell called the Om, or the word. And it's unstruck. That is, until it's struck, universes don't appear. If it remains unstruck, then everything is held in potential in it. So almost correlative again is the Mahat, the great mind of Samkhya, with this sound of Om that Christ was trying to get his apostles to understand. In the beginning was the Word. He was always trying to get them to look into that deeper nature of vibration. And then they will find these streaming particles, not just of physical, atomic variety, but atmic. See, atomic, atmic. And everything that's in between, which is called chitta, or thought, vibration, and mind, how the mind vibrates, how the senses vibrate, how objects vibrate, and tracing them all back to a very definite source. So my point here in bringing up the Mahamudra is that the view of most people, that is the view of the worldly people, the view of the ignorant people, the view of the intellectuals, and the view of many religionists, is that of creationism, which is a very loaded term, as we've been talking about lately, if you look it up in the dictionary or in some various settings. But this idea that everything has come out of creation is rather contrary to what the mind-only schools are proposing. So if you start to study the Vedanta or Buddhism or other systems of Eastern India, of the East, that is in India, you'll find that they're thinking in terms of mind-only schools. Put very nicely here, your view should be that all manifestation, the universe itself, came from the mind. Now that means the mind on 3 levels. The cosmic mind, which is God's mind, which is different than God, because in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. When it was with God, then it separated itself. The Word was something different than the reality. It separated itself so that separation could be given birth. That's where the ego starts in, the ego-mind mechanism. So before it separated itself, then it was just itself, homogeneous, pure, indivisible, all-pervasive, eternal. You look for words in English to try and explain the undescribable, the inexplicable, but there they are, and they can confer a certain understanding to you, almost a taste of that in yourself. You have to look for it inside yourself. So you look for it in the great mind first. So you are going to connect to the cosmic mind through what? Through the collective. The collective consists of what? Everything from the Trinity on down to gods and goddesses, on down to asuras and suras, and on trickling on further out into the ancestors and into the demigods, and further out into the humans, and finally coming all the way down to animals and insects and plants in one march, you see, in an emanation, in a flow of wisdom particles that get grosser and grosser and grosser until they're atomic particles. Reverse the process and they become finer and finer, finer until they become intelligent particles. And that is what people have been labeling creation, preservation, and destruction in cycles. What we're proposing then in the mind-only schools, and people who are not, I'll use a Hawaiian word here, akamai, means in the know. They're not in the know about something other than the theory of creationism, are going to find this very endearing, maybe. They're going to be very attracted to this ring of truth that has to do with everything is in the kingdoms of heaven are within me, because that's exactly how Christ put it. The kingdoms of heaven are within you means all these gradated levels of consciousness are within you, and they emanate out like the peal of a bell once it's struck, and then they return to the bell when the great tone disappears over 4,320,000,000 year cycles times 4 times 8 times 16, until you get into these very, very long cycles of time called yugas and mahayugas in our tradition. So the first part of this Mahamudra teaching and the view is that you must understand that there are many, many illumined souls, many, many illumined souls in different traditions that are thinking in terms not of getting something out of nothing, or not of creating your soul out of dust. Those are metaphoric only. They shouldn't be taken literally. They become superstitions, and then they impede religious progress, spiritual progress. As you take them with metaphors, they're fine, because you can't create a soul. A soul is pure consciousness, and it never was anything but pure consciousness. So when you talk in terms of mind-only schools, you're talking in terms of manifestation, of projection. And the best projector is the mind in cohorts with the intelligence. See, you have your intelligence in hand, then you be the best projector. We talked about that last week in the Bardo states, right? Is that you project bodies. We had a new chart called the palette of future lives. And so it had all these empty canvases which you wrote on it, that an enlightened soul can choose its own body, can choose its gender, can choose its parents, can choose its mission, can choose what karma it wants to bring and what karma it wants to neutralize. It has a wide variety of choices to it based on its enlightenment in the previous lifetime. So it's never caught. It's a, as Zen Buddhism says, it's a glistening serpent, never caught in its own coils. So this glistening serpent, you see, still remains itself, and it remains unfettered, unbound. So in that way, then you have this description of the self which is engaged in dynamism. That's Shakti power. It's manifesting itself. So from the great mind down to the collective mind, you're going to have to make connections. And then finally, it arrives at your individual mind. Not the brain, It'll eventually get there too, because the brain is born with the body. But when we're talking about the individual mind, we're talking about your power to think, and your power to separate yourself out, and your power to use your intelligence. And might as well then start counting all these other practices you do. Your power to meditate, your power to renounce, your power to have compassion, and all the other qualities begin to spill out of that if you have this great choice. Put very well in terms of the view of Mahamudra. Now that's the first part of the view that I've just described to you. The second part is, whereas the universe itself is contained in the mind, the true nature of mind is the realm of illumination, shining with radiance that can neither be conceived or touched. So, if you look into the ordinary mind, you're not going to see this. Even the very astute intellectual mind does not seem to hold its radiance very long, because it's very identified in with the brain, and with instincts, and with heredity, and with genes, and with incarnation, and it doesn't know about reincarnation yet. It's just thinking in terms of one lifetime scenario. It's not thinking outside the box yet. So the ordinary mind is, if you look at it and observe it, scrutinize it, examine it, is going to look very different than this description that the Buddhists are giving you. That the mind itself is the realm of illumination. Everything is emanating forth, and that's because the mind itself, the original mind, is the realm of radiance, of intelligence. So you begin to remake your idea of what the human mind is. First of all, it's not the brain. And second of all, it's not ordinary mind. It's original mind. And now you see why examples are used: pure mind, original mind, no mind in Zen. You have these different descriptions for it, that mind disappears. See? Like in the, we'll see this at our next Zen retreat here in SRV next weekend. We're having our Zen retreat, and you see the ox herding, 10 of them, levels of finding your consciousness, called ox herding. And as the original Zen paintings depicted it, each one of the circles, 10 circles, gets lighter and lighter until there's nothing left in the last one. The 9th one is, the penultimate one, is just blank, because the mind has gone completely out of the ordinary, and the 10th one is left blank with a little opening in the border to illustrate that consciousness is now free. It's outside of its boundaries, and it can come back into its boundaries and leave its boundaries whenever it wants. My teacher used to say that detachment is the first level of teaching, but you should be able to detach at will. That's the yogic level of attainment. To detach is good, but to attach and then let it go, that's better, because then you can identify with certain things. Probably better to say associate with them. Either way, you can identify or associate with certain things, and then when you're done with that thing, you immediately let it go. So you're never bound. You're not ever caught in your own coils. See? A snake that's just one big knot. And by the way, many people are looking like that in today's stressed out times. They're looking like they're caught in their own coils, and they're just a knot of nervousness and fear and doubt and ignorance. And they're not free from their own coils. Their own coils here would be karma, the karma that they're creating. So they're knotted up in their own karma. So that's not a good way to pass from your body. You'll return to your body, your next body, in that same kind of condition, which is evidenced by how many people are born bound and how few are born free. As contradictory as that sounds. Don't sing the song, please. So this is all some preamble and some information about the view, but the real essence of the view here is that all of manifestation, everything that you see manifested, is mind itself. It's, as Holy Mother used to say it, the world is just, objects are just thought made manifest. The pillow you sit on, the chair you sit on, the tree you're seeing, they're just thought made manifest, or just intelligence solidified Everything begins to look to you less and less like an object and more like a congealing of intelligence when you reach a higher state of samadhi. Like we were talking about this morning at satsang, if you were there in the live streaming. So that is a condition of samadhi that happens to a person. It's probably one of the earlier samadhis, is that everything begins to look like a manifestation of your own wisdom. That's called savitarka and nirvitarka and savichara and nirvichara. Those are two samadhis in 4 divisions, with 2 divisions each, that are all about knowledge samadhis, seeing everything as manifested intelligence. So here we have another version of that yogic teaching, Patanjali, in the form of this Tibetan yogic teaching in Buddhism about the view. This is the first of 3 positions. One is view, one is practice, and one is action. So I hope that that is clear to you, what the view is. In other words, this is a view you should adopt if you want to be a Buddhist, or if you want to seek spirituality outside the box, as I was just talking about. You should start thinking of things, everything is my own mind, manifested. All objects are my own intelligence, solidified. And that puts to death fear and doubt, because now there's no doubt as to who did this, who made this karma, who created this world. And you don't bring God down to a creator anymore. You leave him a-create. A-create is the word Swami Vivekananda came up with. God does not create, is not a creator. That's the Trinity you're talking about. God in its most subtle form. But the absolute Brahman, whom we just sang about, Allah, God, Kali, those are hands off. You see, those are pure conscious awareness ideas, and pure consciousness itself. And so that's not going to engage in creation. It's going to have to divide itself. The world is going to have to become other than the Word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. And then when it's other than the Word, it can start the business of projectionism or vibration. Because Brahman is vibrationless. No vrittis there. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha, one of the most famous slokas in yoga. See, yoga, union with God, is nirodha, destroying the waves of the mind. So when we practice the view of the Mahamudra, we're saying all of this is a manifestation of the mind, and oh, guess what? That's not exactly a positive thing. That's not necessarily where we want to be. We want to be where we are, and that's in pure mind, that doesn't create, that doesn't vibrate, that doesn't project. Unless we can do this projection very consciously, like Vivekananda said, I hope a man's not going to be reborn until he can be reborn in a purely conscious state. That's going to mean with his own intelligence in hand, and knowing that the whole universe is a manifestation of that. That's the view. And that the mind is a pool of radiance, a pool of intelligence, and especially when it's mated with the word, Mahat, or the cosmic mind. So there's the teaching of the view. First part of 3 parts of the Mahamudra. Second is this, because the thing that will come up is, what about Maya? What about samsara? What about suffering? What about miseries? What about karma? What about death? What about decay? What about birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death? See, what about those things? Shift over to this chart for a minute. You can see that both Buddhism and Vedanta note the 6 billows, or the 6 transformations. And they may have a few differences in it, like thirst and hunger is included in there, an unsatiable thing that the embodied soul is accompanied with as far as desires and the need to eat and drink. But nonetheless, the 6 billows and the 6 transformations are very prominent teachings in any good wisdom yoga, and Vedanta and Buddhism has them both. So what will come up then in terms of hearing the view is, what about all of these things? You're giving me here comes the pie in the sky philosophy again. You're giving me this bright picture, but I'm not able to see this bright picture without filters. I'm not there yet. Maybe I don't even believe that that bright picture is really true or it even exists. I'm an atheist, I'm an agnostic, I'm a pessimist. I don't believe in religion, I don't believe in enlightenment, whatever the case may be. Then you're still seeing this through the filters of suffering, through Maya, or Buddha called it Mara, the evil one. So that unripened ego, or that darksome mind, is still laboring under those fetters, under those passions, under those kleshas, under those viparyayas, under those billows, and under those transformations. So then, how does Buddhism, with its great Mahamudra, deal with that? That's called the practice. Errant thoughts, the antithesis of the view, are liberated in the Dharmakaya. The Dharmakaya is one of the three bodies of the Buddha. It's called the field of teachings that come from the Buddhas. There's the historical Buddha and so forth, but the Dharmakaya is really the emanation of the wisdom through this enlightened intelligence from the stream of Buddhas that have come to earth. And you want to look at Zen Buddhism, you're talking about 52 generations of living Buddhas that have happened since Shakyamuni. It's a very rather shocking thought. People don't think of it when they think of Buddhism. They just think, oh, there's Buddha and then there's the religion. 2,500 years of Buddhism. But they don't think about this succession line that we just talked about here, from Tilopa to Naropa to Marpa to Milarepa. Well, in Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, yes, there's one, but in Chinese Buddhism and in Zen, if you want to take it all up to contemporary times, there's been some 52 generations of living Buddhas, guru to disciple. Each one of those, the Shakyamuni manifestation. If the view is that everything is a projection of mind and the mind is the realm of radiance, then the Buddha is living in that radiance, and every time he emanates forth, he's a Buddha. He's never not the Buddha. So his students, as we would put it in our tradition, are mind-born children. They're not having necessarily, although some of them did later, and some of the Tibetans do too, they're not having blood children or blood family, they're having mind-born children, passing on the teachings to people that necessarily, from all outer circumstances, they didn't even know or had never met in that lifetime. Yet they recognize the Dharma successor, he comes forward, they transfer or transmit or, yes, transmit is a good word. They give the transmission of wisdom to that Buddha successor, and that awakening continues on the line of teachings. Guru Parampara in our tradition, this line of 52 generations of Buddha in the Buddhist tradition. So that's something to think about. So that is the one living Buddha in all 52 generations that you're seeing. They're one consciousness. It appears like many souls, it's just one soul. Now, might not want to use that word self or soul in terms of talking about Buddhism, but one living, pure mind stream. So the antithesis of the view is this idea of errant thoughts. Where do these negative thoughts, negative karmas come from? If the universe is mind made manifest, then it's probably pretty easy to see why there are so many violent and impure and destructive tendencies and objects in the universe. It's come out of the mind, and the mind is an admixture of good and bad and pleasure and pain and life and death and various transformations. So there's a way of explaining in a very sensible way why the universe is the way it is. Instead of just asking the question, oh, why is there so much suffering? See, because the universe is a manifestation of the mind, and the mind is the source of disease. It's the source of remedies too. Let's look on. He says, awareness, illumination is always blissful there, so meditate in a manner of non-doing and non-effort. These are the key points of the practice. So errant thoughts are liberated by the teachings. One of very profound ways of saying it in Vedanta too is that you go for holy company and you go looking for the Jnana Yoga, and you get that transmission from a teacher, and then your mind is transformed. You don't have doubts and fears and worries anymore, and your suffering goes away. That is, there are certain types of suffering that remain, like birth, growth, disease, old age, and death. But even death, as we're talking about now, and as we spoke about last week, starts to diminish its hold on you, doesn't it? You're not thinking about, oh, my death is coming. You're thinking about living a conscious life that transcends death. So death is reduced to a very paltry role in Divine Mother's universe. As one song in India sings, very paltry role. See? And doesn't need to be the end-all and be-all of existence. It plays a very small part of things. So you begin to think about death differently just when you begin to think about the nature of mind via this view. So errant thoughts will come forward when you hear the view, and you will dunk them into the Dharmakaya like a towel into a ocean, as Sri Ramakrishna said. The mind is the towel, the ocean is these teachings, Dharmakaya, and you just dunk them in there over and over again. You don't ask why, and you don't worry about the outcome. You just wake up one day and you say, my delusion is gone, utterly gone. And there all of a sudden your ignorance has died, and you're not deluded anymore. You might as well call that enlightenment. At least it's a first level of samadhi or wisdom samadhi that's dawned upon you. And that's what they're speaking about here. So meditate in a manner of non-doing, of non-effort. These are the key points of the view. Why should you exert much effort towards that kind of goal-oriented practice when the Dharmakaya will do it all for you? All you need to do is show up. Is that, I think, the mantra of today, you see. All you need to do is show up, sit in the Dharma, and the Dharma will remind you of your true nature. Many beautiful songs have been written not only in the Vedantic way and in the Bhakti tradition, but in Tibetan Buddhism too, by beings like Milarepa. Says, when I think of the Dharma, I can't help but get inspired, and when I get inspired, I can't help but share the Dharma with other people. I'm so enthused about the Dharmic teachings and what they did to me that I have to go out and share them with others. I caught that disease early on, some 20, 30 years ago, and I started singing the songs and teaching. And when my teacher saw me doing that, he said, yes, sing those songs and your whole life will become a song. And I can attest to that. So it'll become a song. And we'll look at that in terms of King Janaka's victory pretty soon. His song of victory. That's a very beautiful teaching out of Lord Vashishta. But let's finish the Mahamudra first, otherwise I'm going to get too many charts going at once, which is my tendency. I'll read that again. That is the practice. Errant thoughts, the antithesis of the view, are liberated in the Dharmakaya. Awareness, the illumination there, is always blissful. Meditate in a manner of non-doing and non-effort. These are the key points of the practice. So they want your practice to be free of goal orientation, effortless, natural, after you have just exposed yourself to the Dharma and to the idea of the mind being radiant. Isn't it a wholly different thing than saying, oh, my mind's full of sin, my mind's full of imperfections, and so forth. How much progress can you make under such a weight? How many lifetimes is it going to take you to get salvation, what to speak of liberation? So if you take this Mahamudra, the Great Seal, and impress that upon your mind, you see, all of a sudden you have changed everything about the conventional way of thinking that your culture, your family line, your series of births have taught you, and taught you wrongly. You're deprogramming in the fastest way when you take up a teaching like that. and you take it seriously. And you begin to practice in a way of non-doing and non-effort. It's rather assuming the Advaita Vedanta, which is why we're calling this class Tibetan Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta. It means non-duality as proposed by Vedanta or by the great seers of India long before Buddha. It's just continuing on in those 52 generations of Lord Buddha with a new mark, you see, with a new seal that fits the age. So first there's the view, then there's the practice. The Mahamudra seal, a three-part seal, ends with action. How is the action described? In the action of naturalness, they call it, the 10 virtues spontaneously grow, and the 10 vices are thus purified. By corrections or remedies, the illuminating void is never disturbed in any way. These are the key points of action. Now, that's a beautiful way of looking at problems and solutions. You think these are coming to my mind all the time and resurfacing, but it's never going to disturb the perfect illuminating void, which was based on the view. You see. The view is, again, all manifestation comes from the mind, and the mind is a place of radiance. So when you take that view, you've set a new precedent. It's a non-dual way of living. You're saying, all of this is perfection, all of this is the light of radiance, everything is radiated with intelligence, a puja is going on everywhere. However you want to put it, and just whether way you put it through your particular temperament and your particular practice, if you take on that view, then immediately what's going to happen is the teachings will come forward from within you, and you'll know how to act. See? That is, any trials or challenges that accost you along the way of action will be immediately liberated in the Dharmakaya and in this illuminating void, because that's its nature. And it's all based in the view. If you have the view, right orientation first, then you're going to be very sure of that. Here's the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Perfect view is first, you see. So let me depart from that Mahamudra chart for just a second to show you how the Ashtanga Marga, the Eightfold Path, which was much earlier than this Mahamudra seal in Tibet, says it. You must have samyak dristi, perfect view first. If you have that perfect view, direct insight into the Dharmakaya, into the field of the teachings, knowledge of the unity of all existence. You see how it's explained in earlier Buddhism, in the Hinayana path, the earliest of all Buddhist teachings, 550 years BC. And then you can go on to perfect resolve. You can go on to perfect speech, perfect conduct, perfect livelihood, perfect effort. Who wouldn't want those? Especially perfect livelihood. In this day and times, everyone is having to make their way in the world. And then finally end up with perfect mindfulness and perfect concentration. We were talking about that in a live streaming class today. A live streaming satsang this morning. That is basically a certain kind of concentration called samadhana, which allows you to concentrate only on reality and put everything else behind you. That's how one gets to faith, from belief. One goes from belief to faith. It's going to be a key piece in the process, is when you get that perfect concentration. So it's very important to the Eightfold Path, as you can see. So let's quit calling Buddhism pessimistic. It starts out by saying that there is pain, dukkha. And the pain is sorrow, lamentation, grief, despair, and so forth. The 6 billows and all of that. But it then turns towards the truth of the origin of suffering. You're supposed to find out the origin of where these sufferings are coming from, these karmas and so forth. So you're going to begin to inspect your mind, because if the Mahamudra is looked at, then the view is not perfect yet, is it? You have some imperfections in the view, and also the Dharmakaya has not been resorted to fully yet. You've heard the teachings, but you haven't dipped yourself into them. You haven't immersed yourself in them. So you still have some deep disciplines to undergo in the spirit of non-effort and non-doing. And so you show up and you put yourself into the teaching. So that's going to help you find the origin of your sufferings. That will lead you to the truth of the cessation of suffering. So that's where Buddhism, in its apparently pessimistic beginnings, turns optimistic, doesn't it? You find that there is a cessation of suffering there, and that's at the foundation of yoga and Vedanta too. Basically, you transcend your suffering, you transform it. You transform poison into nectar, as the Tantricists say. And then the fourth noble truth is there's an eightfold path that will help you realize the cessation of suffering. And that's what we just looked at. So, Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, a very prominent and a very well-known teaching. I won't go into it in depth here, but I referred to it because of the idea of perfect view. Now back to the Mahamudra, we see that to finish the class they have a little clarification for us in this sidebar that I've put together at the bottom. The three principles of the central practice of Mahamudra. A, the basis is that all phenomena bear the seal of combined emptiness and luminosity. You can see later on how Zen benefited from this kind of interpretation that Tibetan Buddhism gave to the early Hinayana path of Buddhism. Basically, emptiness and luminosity are put together here. When you first hear the teachings of Advaita Vedanta, or you first hear the teachings of Buddhism, it sounds like nihilism and voidism to you. You think that maybe the idea of emptiness is that there's nothing there, so you don't know how to meditate on it or how to think of it. You think maybe it's just the emptiness of ego. But Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said, as long as you're in the body, you can never get rid of the ego. You just have to keep it at a minimum, keep it diminished, its influence. So you began to think in terms of a more practical way of looking at it. And when you get to the basis of the teaching in Mahamudra, you find out that they're putting their description of emptiness is that it's full of luminosity. It's not emptiness like a void, or emptiness like blackness, or emptiness like nothingness. It's luminosity. Didn't we just say in the view that the whole universe is contained in the mind, and the mind is the realm of luminosity? That's a little bit of further description about the view. Now, the practice, well, yes, the path or the practice they call it, is divided up this way: direct, effortless experience of the nature of pure mind. That's where we have these great Advaitic teachings in the Ashtavakra Samhita or the Avadhuta Gita that says, Mano Vanasham Natu Naiva Shudam, Guru Padesham Natu Naiva Shudam, Sadanga Yoga Natu Naiva Shudam. Means that you cannot purify the self by practice of the yoga. You cannot purify the self by bowing at the Guru's feet. You cannot purify yourself by destroying the waves of the mind, because the self's already pure. So you should be thinking about that teaching of the Mahamudra then, that's telling you that your direct spiritual experience of pure mind is going to end this cycle of problems and solutions. The illuminating void is never disturbed by problems and solutions, and it's never bothered by remedies like health and so forth. So if you're taking the slow boat to China, or you're coming at it from the bottom up, then you're trying to gain longevity of the body through healthful means, you see. But you haven't walked straight up to the pure mind and looked at it and said, there are no problems, there are no solutions, there's just the great illuminating void, and I'm it. Do you have the power and wherewithal to do that? Well, Mahamudra is allowing you to do that by proposing a very special view to you. That the whole universe is a manifestation of your mind, and that mind is radiant and pure. By inception, it's called the original mind. You get it? Om, original mind? You see?
Yeah.
But be careful not to use Om wrong, or it's ordinary mind. You see? And in Zen that would be okay too. Original mind is ordinary mind. Call it every man's consciousness. But it has to be realized. That's what the Vedanta insists. This self is perfect, but you can't do away with the problems of thinking about that until you realize it. Ramakrishna used to say, if you go outside and you keep pricking on this thorn bush that's on your porch, and so you yell at the bush, burn, burn, but it doesn't get rid of it. So one day you take some wood and a match out there, you burn the bush. No more thorns, you see. So that's kind of like getting rid of the whole shooting match, you see, the whole karmic shooting match. You just burn the bush by action. And so you have practice and view, practice, and action going together in a perfect seal that you've impressed again on your consciousness. And you might say that this seal is actually already impressed upon consciousness, that these are not just possibilities or perspectives that they're presenting to you, but that they found out that this is the truth of the matter, and this is just how they explain the truth. The void illuminating mind, free of all problems, and the Dharmakaya, the field of teachings that are there in the mind. You see, we're always looking at the field of problems, the field of errors, the field of solutions, diseases, remedies, but we're never looking at the field of Dharmakaya teachings, which are pure and perfect in their inception. Intelligent particles, streams of intelligent particles. We're not taking recourse to that supreme remedy, if you want to call it that. Kingdom of heaven within you. We're not standing up and looking at it and facing off with all demons. Get thee behind me. Christ is saying would be, well, now I found the Dharmakaya. This is natural. This has been my practice of non-doing and non-self-effort. I arrived here without a bead of sweat on my soul. See, it's been perfectly natural. You say the word they use here is spontaneous. Naturalness of action spontaneously grows in you, they say. So, in 5 ways they put this. When focusing occurs, focus without objective. That's there. When focusing occurs, focus without objective. Remember, everything has been pointing to this goalless orientation. Goal-oriented practice is always going to bear a fruit. You see, and a fruit isn't necessarily what you want. That is, a fruit is going to be called a remedy, right? And then there's going to be another solution that may follow, another problem that may follow that solution. So until you get to the ultimate solution of all, then you're going to have to follow this very effortless way. So when focusing occurs, focus without objective. When stabilizing occurs, stabilize without distraction. Your meditation stabilize in the view, in the practice, and let your action also follow suit. That will be the nectar of naturalness that they talk about again in the Ashtavaka Samhita and the Avadhuta Gita. These are great non-dual scriptures. When shifting occurs, shift without grasping. So if you have a perspective and a view, and you find yourself still laboring under old habits, God creates, or 7 days creation theory, or whatever you've been programmed with, but now you realize that's you can let go of that. There's a higher way of saying that, a higher way of realizing that. So when you make that shift without grasping. Make it a natural sequence, because you're now released into the Dharmakaya. You're like Ramakrishna said, a fish let out of a goldfish bowl, you see, into the lake. Imagine what it would feel like, having spent most of its life in a goldfish bowl. going under a little bridge. Again and again. You see, that's circles of lifetimes. So imagine if somebody just took it and said, oh, I'm going to free you now, like a bird from a cage, into the air, and the fish was released into the lake. See, so that's what happens when you enter into the Dharmakaya, the field of teachings, and it completely releases you from old ways of thinking. So when that happens, let it happen naturally. Don't grasp it like, oh, I've seen the truth, I must hang on to it. You see, because anything you grasp at tends to run away from you. See, so you must shift naturally if you're to follow your original vow that you made toward the view. If you accept this view and you practice it, this is the way you're going to have to practice it, in other words. And when manifestations occur, experience them as reality. Before you're looking at manifestation as a problem, you see. I just had my first baby, not me personally, but if you were to say that, you see, then you can look at it as manifestation, right? The manifestation of a soul in a body. This brings a great problem for me. Lots of concerns, lots of potential worries, lots of responsibilities, lots of duties. But if you were to look at that as a manifestation of God, then you'd be looking at your child as a manifestation of reality. It's come out of your own mind, right? Because all manifestation has come out of your mind, so this child has come out of your own mind. It hasn't come out of just your body. It will look something like you, most likely, but it's really going to look more like your mind. See, and you'll be sharing the same mind. And if you raise the children in the Dharma, in the Dharmakaya, in the field of teachings and virtues, then it will develop those things quickly and will release itself. And then you've got a guru all your life, you see. Very possible that disciples who go to gurus had them as their child in an earlier lifetime and taught them well, and they exceeded them. My teacher was always saying that. You must become greater than your teacher. Because why? For some sort of show who's better? No, because this is the way the Dharma is passed in a line of succession. You want your child, your student, or whoever is there to learn it better than you, because and the next time around, that might be your guru. And you might be coming back to that soul, you see, for some help. And it realized in a very special way the teaching you gave it. So to give them the Dharmic teachings, to immerse them in the Dharmakaya, is the best way to raise children. And to start out then, you're going to have to experience them as reality, not as illusion, not as Maya, not as problems, not as my life is over, and I have to give everything to my children now, but you have to see them as manifestation of God. Seeing God in everything. The fifth and final point of the path they bring out is when liberation occurs, allow that to occur naturally. They say do your meditations and so forth and your shifts of thinking without grasping. But when finally that moment of illumination comes, make sure that you let it dawn on you naturally. That's called sahaja samadhi. And the idea, the story they give about it is an elephant enters into a lake and nothing happens to the lake. Samadhi happened to a person and doesn't look any different now than he did when he was ignorant. It's the same person. Mm-hmm. Which is why Holy Mother said, have I grown 2 horns? Is that why you've come to see me? In other words, they hear she's enlightened, they go looking for her, they expect to see some spectacle. She's still a village woman sitting there with her white cloth on, kneading bread on the floor, and talking to her students. But she's enlightened, you see. But you can't see it from the outside. You didn't see the process of enlightenment that went on inside of her. Or, in her case, for how many lives of enlightenment she lived. In the case of some of these great beings, that their enlightenment happened so far back. Or possibly in the case of a Nityasiddha, they never knew what suffering and ignorance was. Any suffering they knew was on your account. That's the sacrifice Ishvara makes when it comes into form. I mean, that's very well instanced in some of the studies of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother's life we took. Once Sri Ramakrishna lost a nephew, I think it was, and he said, "Oh, now I know what the people of the world feel like. When I lost him, I felt like my heart was being wrung like a wet towel." See? So he said that as if he had never experienced suffering before. So this is how you have to look at a Nityasiddha or an avatar, is that it wasn't a time when they needed to get enlightened. These are very special souls, cosmic, beyond cosmic souls. They come straight out of the light. They're cut in pure consciousness. Pure conscious awareness is their form. So when they take on a human form, it looks like their mind, pure. And that's why Sri Ramakrishna could be the paragon of universal harmony, could bring the Divine Mother path to earth, and could liberate and bring 5 million people to enlightenment, which is how many are following him now, after just a little over 100 years since his passing. So when you see a soul like that, then, and you put it together with view and practice and action, you see this great seal is impressed upon them from the very get-go. That's their nature. Mahamudra is their great nature, the great mudra. They're it. They're the sign. Christ said that about himself often. So you're seeing God appear in human form. In human form, if you follow this teaching, then it begins to look like that manifestation is divine. And you can be sure about that manifestation. Now you have to be sure about your own manifestation and how you're looking at things. If you put on yellow glasses, he used to say, you'll see everything yellow. So he means when you put on the Dharmakaya, the teachings, everything will look like Dharma to you. But if you didn't put that on, it would just seem ordinary and regular. You see. So there's a certain perspective, view, that you have to put on in order to see God in human form, and eventually beyond form. God is with form, God is beyond form, God is beyond form and formlessness too, is how he used to say it. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Now let's look at a little more clarification of the last third of this Mahamudra, Great Seal. It's in terms of the result, freedom from liberation and the agent of liberation. It's very Zen-like too. You see how Zen would have benefited very much by seeing the manifestation, the expression of Buddhism over these many generations, because that's very much a part of their teaching as well. That, like I said, in ox herding, you find out, you find the ox, you find the tracks of the ox, and pretty soon you have to go through these 10 stages. By the time you're at the 9th and 10th stage, then all of a sudden you're at this point of giving up liberation, or the thought of liberation, or being the liberated one, and you're just in a perfectly natural condition. Ordinary man's consciousness, only attended, as Mahamudra would say it, by this emptiness that's full of illumination. That's why you don't grasp after it. If you grasp after objects, they're empty, right? It's the same rule. You can't grasp after enlightenment either, because it's empty. But you're talking about two different kinds of emptiness. One is vibrating at a billionth of a particle's emptiness, a billionth of a second, you see, particles. And the other is an emptiness that's empty of everything except the illuminating void, the pure mind, the Buddha mind, the original mind. So the idea would be that there's no liberation, and that's actually what's put right here in this excerpt from, famous excerpt that everyone likes, from the Diamond Sutra. It says, "There is no nirvana to attain beyond, there is no samsara here to renounce." Mm-hmm. So you're getting over the idea of even the subtlemost of dualities. And that view of naturalness and that path and action of spontaneous wisdom that you have decided to take on as your own view, as your own practice, as your own activity, now is convincing you and coming around full circle so that there is no nirvana to attain anymore and there's no samsara to renounce. That's what this means. Freedom from liberation and from the agent of liberation. Also from intellection and conceptualization, and from false identities, and from hopes and fears. As Swami Vivekananda put it so nicely, say peace to all. From me, no danger be to aught that lives. From those who dwell on high, those who lowly creep, I am the self in all. All worlds, both here and there, do I renounce. All heavens, all hells, all earths, all hopes, and all fears. Thus be thou calm, Sannyasin bold, say Om Tat Sat Om. Thus cut thy bonds, say Om Tat Sat Om. So, in Beautiful Song of the Sannyasin, one of the verses, Vivekananda declares, get beyond these false identities and strike off hopes and fears and be your true self and your true nature. So this Mahamudra, the Great Seal teaching, is a precious gem for all the practitioners of the Dharma. This is Swadharma, the universal Dharma, that comes in the form of teachings of all religions. In this way it's put in terms of the Dharmakaya, the field of teachings flowing ever and always from the Buddhas, from the living Buddhas. Now, with the Mahamudra and Great Seal under our consideration, I wanted to show you, or at least get a start on before our break, King Janaka's Song of Victory. It's a chart that I don't think we've seen very often. It's one of the now 120 or 125 Vedanta charts that I've created from the teachings there. And everyone, of course, who has ever taken teachings in the Vedic tradition very much likes the idea of King Janaka, because even Sri Ramakrishna mentioned him quite a few times in the Gospel that M was able to put into form a splendid manuscript that everyone should read, Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And he talks about King Janaka as one of these special souls who, as he quotes, drinks his milk from a brimming cup. That is, he's a king, he has riches, he has lands, he has servants, he has wealth, he also has enlightenment. So everyone likes that. You see. Oh, I wish I had everything. I want to become infinitely rich with the whole territories of the Divine Mother. So they think in terms of being like King Janaka. Do you want to be like Shankara? Do you want to be like the renunciate Buddha? No, I'd rather be like King Janaka, thank you. Because he has everything and drinks his milk from a brimming cup. See. Well, also Ramakrishna has gone into the life of King Janaka, which if you read Yoga Vashishta and other ancient scriptures, and also his meetings with Vedavyas and his son, Sukadev, if you read a lot of those, then you'll find out how these great souls often approached Janaka to find out how he did it, how he remains so free even amidst all the trappings of the world. Very much like this great seal. He must have this great seal imprinted upon his consciousness very deeply in order to go into the world and remain free. It's a very difficult task to do that. They say any kind of association with wealth whatsoever leaves a little distortion on the mind. It doesn't matter who it is. If you're close to wealth, there'll be some distortion. Sri Ramakrishna said, an object in a mirror reflects in a mirror. I mean, he's talking about wealth when he gives that story. That a rich man's treasure, even if he puts it in a bank somewhere, or hides it, or buries it, his mind is always on it. He's always thinking about it. So it's a great distraction to him. And if you keep it near you, that is, your mind is the mirror. So if you keep an object near you, it reflects in the mirror. So that's a rich person's wealth, or anybody's wealth, really, if they are still under the insinuation of worldliness. So King Janaka, how did he do it, being free of all that? Sri Ramakrishna used to say about him that you'd find him with his priests, or with the rishis, or in his library studying the great scriptures. You wouldn't find him counting his wealth, or enjoying his foods, or exploring his lands, and gloating over everything he owns. Whenever you went looking for Janaka, he was always in his library reading the books, or talking to the priests, the temple priests, and finding out more about divine reality. The more he could find out about it, the better. So that's the way. In fact, I think it was a story about him where he renounced wanting to be a king, and some great soul talked him into keeping the station of royalty so that he could help others. And that's how sometimes they do to people who get enlightenment, who want to leave behind the world. They say, oh no, stay behind in the world so you can help others. And that's how, because they have compassion, then they will stay behind and keep that station. The ego of a teacher, Sri Ramakrishna used to call it. We'd keep the ego of a teacher for the sake of others. So when we talk about King Janaka's Song of Victory, we go a little bit deeper into the life of that great soul. Look at how it's broken up. Melodies of mourning, improvisational airs of awakening, variations on a theme of victory, and the serenades of samadhi. Sorry, I'm a musician, and have been all my life, and probably many lives, so I constructed his life under terms of music and gave it subtitles like that. Well, his melodies of mourning, here you are, looking at them. Don't forget about these melodies of mourning, the 6 billows and the 6 transformations. Nobody can escape those. Even the avatar suffers those. So there are some sufferings you can transcend, and some sufferings you have to forbear. Titiksha, it's called. And don't also then forget about the Mahamudra as we look through this, because this is all talking about getting out of that problem of suffering. All errant thoughts are liberated in the Dharmakaya, the field of teachings. That's what you need to know. You just go into the teachings, you immerse yourself in them. You don't need anything else. You don't need health regimens. You don't need exercise. Those things you can take recourse to if you want. You certainly don't need asana and pranayama. You just go into the teachings and you immerse yourself there, and you get as deep into them as you can, and all problems go away. And it's the quickest way, Vivekananda said. The sword of wisdom way is the swiftest way to come to enlightenment. It will probably take you about 1 lifetime of dedication, whereas other paths takes you many lifetimes. For instance, 3 lifetimes if you follow conventional means according to Buddhist idea of nidanas, or links of suffering. So before we go into King Janaka's Song of Mourning, here's what suffering really looks like over 3 lifetimes. Avidya, root ignorance, that is, I don't know my true self, so I lived a whole life not knowing my true self. My true self is the void illuminating radiance of mind. That self we just talked about in the Great Seal. Then I developed mental samskaras, impressions, because I was ignorant. Then I lived a whole life in ignorance, and now my modus operandi is ignorance. Avidya. Right there. Then, based on those mental impressions, and I'm going to go through this swiftly, relative consciousness develops. That's worldliness. Awareness gets crystallized by previous life experiences. And you might notice that in people, and maybe have noticed that in yourself as you've struggled to get free, is that you've fallen into certain traps and moorings that kept your sailing ship from, as Ramprasad sings in some of the songs, from escaping out of port into the open waters, flying, becoming free. And those things are keeping you bound. So strike off thy fetters, as Vivekananda says, bonds that bind thee down. From relative consciousness, name and form, that is, this is where a new body develops. These developed your first body in ignorance, your second body starts here, and a fresh body is formed based on your impulses from the past. Then the 6 bases are operative. They expose the realm of the senses to more karma. That is, you begin to focus the senses upon the objects, and they become, they convince you that the world is real. Sri Ramakrishna says, the more lives you live in ignorance, the more the world appears as real to you. Beautiful statement in the Gospel of Ramakrishna, hidden amongst 1,000 other pages. The more lifetimes you live in ignorance, avidya, the more you begin to believe that the world is real. The first thing Vedanta tells you when you come into holy company is the world's unreal. Only Brahman is real. So people overlook the second half of that statement and just begin to grieve that the world is unreal. Or they don't want to hear it. Say, oh, I don't believe you, I'm going away now to experience the world some more. And so this process, they haven't broken or snapped the chains of rebirth yet. And if you want proof of that, just go out in the world and start looking. Just look and see how many people are really free, how many people are really bound, how many people are nervous wrecks and suffering, how many people are peaceful. It's going to convince you right away that there must be something, at least, to this idea of reincarnation and in ignorance. See? And the Mahamudra then will convince you that there's always also something to reincarnation in radiance, out of your own pure mind, after dipping yourself in the teachings and getting free, coming to know the truth, and the truth shall
set you free.
Set you free, brother. Yeah. So the 6 bases, sparsha, contact and relations, furthers the problem. Intermingling with the world and its people and its objects contribute to karmic conditioning. You're not intermingling with holy company, with the dharmic, with the dharma, and the people who are in sanghas and the people who are in special situations, the seekers, the spiritual beings. You're not mingling with them. You're mingling with people of the world, families in ignorance, and societies in ignorance. And so sparsha, that actually thickens the pot. You see, more vines of karma are growing in your second lifetime. It's going to take you 3 lifetimes to get three of this, they say. Vedana, sensation, contact with the senses, with their objects basically, believing the objects to be real and seeking pleasures of the senses and forgoing the difficulties of spiritual practice. What is sweet in the beginning, Krishna says in the Gita, you must eschew that. And what is sour in the beginning, you must take that to yourself. What's sour in the beginning is having to do your spiritual practice. What's sweet in the beginning is those things given to you as objects to please the senses. That turns sour later. So he's wanting you to free yourself from that tendency by seeking that which is seemingly poisonous to the rest of the world, and turning it and watching it turn into nectar as you practice. Then you have trishna, craving and desire, which thickens it. Attachment, a new birth, that's the third body. Then jati, rebirth again, and old age and death. We've gone through this chart several times before. I bring it up simply to show you the stages of progress that happen to be in these 12 links, or nidanas they're called in Buddhism, which cover some 3 lifetimes, which will, unless you have a very special boon, special grace of a holy soul, a luminous soul to teach you, and a desire for liberation and a human body, it's going to be very difficult for you to snap this in less than 3 lifetimes. That's the way the Buddhists present it. 3 lifetimes would actually be quick. You're talking about people who are living hundreds and thousands of lives in ignorance over long cycles. They bring that up too in the teachings. All right, well, before I launch into King Janaka's Song of Victory and all its nuances and its melodies and its themes and variations, we should stop here for our break, but make sure to stay in there because this is a very precious chart which is going to reveal some beautiful things, and I have a few songs I'll sing for you that are in tune with King Janaka's own music. Om Asato, Om Asato Ma Sadgamoya, Tamaso Ma Joytir Gamoya, Mrichor Ma Amritam Gamaya, Abira Abira Mayeti, Rudrayate Dakshinamukam, Tenamam Pahinicham, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.